We want to turn our attention to the British phone hacking scandal, and we want to welcome Melanie Sloan, who is the Executive Director of the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. Good morning. This is the headline from the British newspaper The Guardian. Rupert Murdoch's Fox broadcast license is targeted by a U.S. ethics group. That is your group. You have sent a letter to the FCC commissioner saying that Fox, which has 27 broadcast operations here in the U.S., their licenses should be revoked. Why?
That's right, because under the American law, the FCC has a standard that only people of good moral character can hold broadcast licenses. And when you're found to have poor character, you can have your license revoked. And included within that definition is the FCC has found that when people have lacked candor, that has been a reason to revoke a license. While clearly here, what we're seeing from the British inquiries is that Mr. Murdoch and his son, James Murdoch, both lacked candor. The Culture Committee recently found that the testimony of Rupert Murdoch was barely credible, and that's certainly something that the U.S. authorities ought to take into consideration in considering the Murdoch's retention of these broadcast licenses.
How is British tabloid behavior relevant to America's problems? How would you address that?
Sure. I think that this is not merely a question of British tabloids. I mean, Rupert Murdoch is an American citizen, let's emphasize that, and his company is based here at home in the United States. News Corp is a massive company, and its holdings extend all over the world, but this is an American business, and we have American laws that may be violated. And top American executives of any corporation need to be held responsible for their conduct. There is a specific federal law that requires people who hold broadcast license to be of good character. And one of the things the FCC has considered in the past is whether or not folks who hold licenses have the requisite candor. And so much of this inquiry is forcing James Murdoch and Rupert Murdoch to testify before inquiries in Great Britain under oath, and the committees, the Parliament has found that they simply have lacked candor, that they have not been credible. And so basically they're saying they've been lying in Great Britain. And if you've been lying in Great Britain, the FCC standard, it doesn't say you have to have lied in America. It says you have to have candor overall. And so I think even if they're lying in Great Britain and not here at home, I think that's a significant problem for them that the FCC and Congress, frankly, should investigate. There's the potential that the News Corp officials have violated the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. There has been evidence that News Corp individuals on the payroll of News Corp have bribed officials in Great Britain. And if they did in fact bribe these officials, that would be an American company paying bribes to foreign officials. That would violate the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So that's one clear set of violations. And in fact, the Levinson inquiry in Great Britain received a statement from Rupert Murdoch admitting that he was cooperating with the Department of Justice on such an inquiry. But there's also a separate inquiry, as I understand it, into whether there was phone hacking here in the United States. There was an allegation made last summer that a U.S. police officer had been offered money to obtain phone records of victims of 9/11. And so there has been an inquiry now into whether there was hacking of 9/11 victims, and some of their families have come forward and said that they believe that their phones were hacked. So that's another inquiry going on. I do think if that turns out to be true, that will be a huge scandal here in America. But the problem here is that the FCC hasn't even done an investigation. So far, Julius Genachowski, the chairman of the FCC Commission, has said flat out that he viewed this as a scandal for a Great Britain scandal and not an American issue, and he has refused to do anything. And that's why Crew has also, in addition to sending Mr. Genachowski a letter, we've sent letters to the House and Senate Commerce Committees. The Commerce Committees have jurisdiction over the over the FCC, and we'd like them to hold hearings on whether the FCC should be taking further action, and they could hold hearings to discover whether or not the Murdochs have the requisite candor and push the FCC to act.
Will they? Will Congress take this up?
Well, it was a terrific step that yesterday Senator Rockefeller, the chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee, did in fact send a letter to Lord Levinson asking for further information. He asked for information regarding potential bribery by U.S. officials of people in Great Britain. He also asked for information about phone hacking, anything that might make an American nexus. So he was asking for that information. And hopefully that information will come and they'll consider holding hearings. But so far we haven't seen a great willingness. Certainly the House, which is run by the Republican majority, is unlikely at this point to hold any kind of hearings. They generally are very close with Fox News. And in some ways, I think we might be seeing the same kind of problems that they have in Great Britain, although not perhaps to the same extent, which is that American public officials are in fact very closely tied with Rupert Murdoch and Fox executives. Roger Ailes, the head of Fox, has a long history with Republicans. And so I think that we may see this closeness making American politicians hesitant to take this on. News Corporation has many friends in Congress, which may be part of the reason we're not hearing more from Congress about this. They spread their political donations around widely, not just to Republicans, but to Democrats as well. I think making members of Congress sit back and not want to take action unless they're really going to be forced to.
And this is from Jim. Melanie Sloan, do you want all local Fox affiliates to be taken off the air or just transfer ownership to someone else?
Oh, I think it's just that ownership needs to be transferred to someone else. Under FCC rules, they can consider an applicant's past conduct, including non-broadcast conduct, as a guide to how an applicant is likely to operate a broadcast station in the future. And they look at this, whether there's been a pattern of misbehavior. And I think that's what we're really learning in Great Britain, of what a pattern of misbehavior there's been. I mean, we're not talking about a couple of isolated incidents. We're talking about misconduct that dates back at least 7 years. And it is that kind of issue that I really think the FCC and American politicians need to look at. The American officials passed laws at one point saying that in order to retain broadcast licenses, you needed to be open and honest. And certainly those are problems that we're seeing with the Murdochs in Great Britain. And so American officials have a responsibility, in fact, to consider that in looking at these broadcast licenses here at home.